Episode 10. Soldier. Sunday, July 19, 2037. One day before, Riz was up early with the rest of the ragtag army of Broadsiders. They stood in bone suits, weapons ready, filling the main room of the cramped safe house. Word had spread fast, this was the big push, and it was going down, today. But something felt off. The walls were hot with condensation. Jason had the schematics of the pyramid and its security systems blown up in front of the crowd. From the server at the house in Noe Valley, we can disable all the pyramid's security, he told the crowd. We can break out all the Broadsiders being held in the tombs in the basement of Proto HQ and hit Proto where they live. He waved a hand, motioning to the holding cells in the bowels of the pyramid. You're sure the source is legit? Riz asked. Trace legit, Jason replied. It all came through the radio network. Totally checks out. Riz wasn't convinced. The radio network could easily have been compromised. She was about to say this out loud when Jason turned away. He opened a map, zoomed on a house, and drew an X on it. First, we need to get to the security server, which is in this house. We printed 2 new vehicles, they're downstairs. Shiv and Taki, take those to the house with your teams. It's lightly guarded, a few marshals, nothing we can't handle. I guess they didn't want anyone to notice. Jason opened a live security feed of the house, a classic San Francisco painted lady. Its intricate paintwork gleamed in the morning sunshine. There was a temporary checkpoint in the otherwise quiet street, manned by a squad of marshals and a riot wagon. A second squad was posted up on the porch of the townhouse. Jason dropped 2 little vehicle icons onto the map. They moved along the street as he spoke. Break through the blockade. We'll have a team on the ground to support you. Once you get to the house, use the patches on the marshals outside. Hack them, take control, and keep them out there covering you. You'll need them to fend off any reinforcements. Taki, stay outside with your team and cover Shiv's crew. Shiv, you guys get inside and find the server. Riz watched, unable to shake the doubts she had, but unable to speak up. She'd never been great at saying her piece, especially when it mattered, and especially to Jason, who had intimidated her for years playing Broadside. She didn't like letting herself down. She wished she hadn't let Paprika down too. Jason pulled up another map of the downtown area, covered in arrows, glowing in the air. We need all other teams in place around the pyramid when we take the security systems out. I'll coordinate that from here. Shiv and Taki's teams will lead the charge on the house in Noe Valley. The rest of you, get downtown. He turned and grinned at the crowd. This is it. Let's roll. Shiv bellowed, turning to the group. A cheer went up, and the Broadsiders started to move out. Riz hung back. She had to say something. She slunk over to Jason as the others filed past him. Are you sure about this? Riz said, scratching the back of her head. Something feels off to me. This British guy he just told you all this stuff? Jason patted Riz on her shoulder. Yeah, it's good. De nada. There's nothing to worry about. I just think we should double check. Riz trailed off as Jason squeezed her shoulder. Chill Habibi, said Jason. We did. I told you. It's good. Remember what we talked about? Following orders? Just get out there and kick some ass, okay? Jason walked out smiling, leaving Riz thoroughly unconvinced. Shiv screamed down the 101 in a freshly printed open-top SUV, with Taki and his team close behind in a second vehicle. Riz sat next to Shiv in the passenger seat, agitated. A third soldier in a pink Broadside ski mask sat in the back, hand hanging off the roll bar, next to what looked like a large toolbox. D-tag hoodies covered the team's heads, their armor hidden underneath. Skull helmets and weapons lay out of sight at their feet. Another team is in position to help you through the checkpoint, Jason said over the radio. Riz zoomed in on the street ahead. At the mouth of the street, a line of red and white robots spread across the asphalt. A big sign floated above them that read, "Road closed." Shiv turned off the freeway. Taki followed. The SUVs sped up, hurtling towards the blockade. Jane and Paprika had started early too. Jane was still in sweats. Paprika was wearing the new stealth bone suit. They sat in Jane's office, drinking coffee and sifting through proto data. In an instant, the intranet screen turned red, shutting them out. Paprika looked worried. Jane swiped her security token again. Nothing. She tossed it on the desk with a sigh and checked the downloads folder. They shut us out, but I managed to pull most of the stuff before. They shut us out? Paprika interjected, standing up. If we just got shut out of the network, someone knows we were there. But we used Shroud? Jane narrowed her eyes. They don't know it was us. We also used your security token with a unique hash, Paprika replied, feeling their chest tighten. Are you sure they couldn't trace that hash to you? Jane looked uneasy. She shook her head, turned, and opened the downloads folder. But they haven't. We'd have seen it. If they logged any kind of security breach, there would have been an alert, a bunch of lockout notifications. It's protocol. Jane scanned through the files she had been able to download. Paprika looked at the files too. I don't think your man Rook follows a lot of protocols. Paprika noticed a file name. info_4_radio. Wait, they said. What do you guys use radio for? Jane looked mystified. Radio? We don't use radio. Nobody uses radio? We do, replied Paprika, clicking on the file. They opened the safe house map Rook had sent to Jason. They zoomed in on the house Rook had highlighted. Is that? Paprika began, seeds of panic sprouting. Jane nodded, looking pale. My house. Paprika went white. They opened the other files, taking them in. Is there a Proto server here? No, said Jane, I don't understand. Paprika jumped up, put their helmet on and sidled up to the window. Outside, 2 marshals stood sentry in front the house. 2 sharp shots lay on the roof opposite. Paprika ducked under the window frame, moving to the other side to get an angle on the rest of the street. They saw more marshals and sharp shots lying in wait behind cars and filament recycle cans across the road. They noticed a shimmering patch of air on another rooftop a few blocks over. They zoomed in. Stealths. The sun bounced off a car windshield, catching Paprika's eye. 2 vehicles full of hooded figures were heading towards a security blockade at the end of the street. They're everywhere, Paprika said to Jane. We're leaving. Now. Jane jumped up and peered out of the window too. They turned to Paprika. You go, I'll stay and buy you some time. They won't hurt me, but if they catch you, they'll kill you. Paprika shook their head in protest. Go, Jane said firmly. Trust me. Paprika took a beat, nodded, turned, and ran. Koth, Michelle and Art piled out of the back of the van downtown, in bone suits, helmets and D-tag hoodies, carrying gym bags. Michelle closed the doors, nodding to the other Broadsiders still inside the vehicle. The van pulled away, its glass tinting to hide its occupants. They hid in the shadows of a side entrance to the building site where Michelle worked. Koth looked up at the silhouette of the half-finished tower, cranes hanging from its summit. The Proto Pyramid, 1 block over, glowed behind it. He looked out at the street, his hand closing around the EMP blaster in his pocket. 3 dark shapes with glowing blue's eyes were approaching from the other end of the block. The shapes stepped out of the shadows, their red and white armor plating catching the light. Let's move, Koth whispered. Michelle swiped her security token and the site door clicked open. Art and Michelle crept inside while Koth kept his eyes on the marshal patrol. Keeping a hand on his gun, he stepped through the door, closing it behind them. Shiv's SUV bore down on the blockade. Inside the Broadsiders were ready, helmets on and weapons cocked. Taki's crew followed in the second vehicle just behind. Got the Alameda aliens flanking you. They'll hit them from the to make sure you get through. Jason informed them over the radio. The Alameda aliens? They suck, said Shiv, handing the wheel to Riz and climbing in back, opening the large toolbox. Hope they shoot marshals better than they play Broadside. Riz added. Shiv hoisted an EMP Gatling gun out of the toolbox, snapping it onto the SUV's roll bar with a clang. Riz accelerated. Ahead at the blockade, the marshals' ears twitched as the vehicles whistled towards them. They leveled their guns like a firing squad. Ready, aim, instructed the squad leader. Rat-a-tat-a-tat-tat-tat. EMP pulses rained down, carving the squadron into wet green chunks. The dying robots turned to see 5 broadsiders stood on a rooftop, all wearing helmets shaped like alien heads, filleting the marshals with EMP fire. More pulses hit them from Shiv's Gatling gun. The SUVs smashed through the line, rolling over the broken, gooey bodies like speed bumps. Shiv, impressed, crossed their arms above their head, making the bones up sign to the aliens. Rook watched the SUV's progress from the hexacopter. Everyone in position? He asked. In position, sir, came the response from a marshal on the ground. Rook noticed a small movement outside Jane's house. Zoom on that. The camera magnified Jane, walking out of her front door onto the porch with hands raised in surrender. As he watched, he noticed something else. A shadow at the back of the house creeping across the balcony. It moved like a tiger, jumping down into the backyard. He zoomed in. The pixels grew into an anodized black skeleton with cat-like ears. He recognized him instantly. Warhead! Rook shouted in surprise. He's with Stratton? Get a team on him now. Take him out. PSCHAOOW. The heat ray hit Paprika straight in the temple, taking them down. They rolled instinctively, the way broadsiders were trained to. Even though the military-grade helmet absorbed most of the blast, the pain was blinding. Paprika dipped into cover, clutching their burning skull, avoiding the second and third blasts the sharp shot fired. Somehow, Paprika managed to scramble to their feet, trying to think through the wall of heat filling their brain. Paprika ran as their vision returned. More blasts rang out as they headed down the path around the side of the house, past the utility room, the recycle cans, out towards the street. Paprika had no weapon, and no plan. All they knew was there at least 3 different types of robots trying to kill them, and it was time to leave. Paprika veered to the right, heading up the street. They saw Jane to their left, arms raised as 2 SUVs full of hooded figures pulled up. Were those broadsiders? Another blast just missed Paprika. They turned to see the blurry outlines of 2 stealths across the street running straight for Paprika. It wasn't clear what was going on, but it didn't make sense to wait around and find out. Paprika sprinted away from Jane's house, running faster than they knew they could. The SUVs scraped to a stop at the house. The broadsiders took their hoods down, revealing their menacing, multicolored skull helmets. Shiv sprayed the Marshal squadron on the front porch with the Gatling gun, offlining most of them and sending the rest diving for cover. The broadsiders jumped out, EMP guns blazing. Jane ducked in the corner of the porch, avoiding the blasts. The broadsiders inched up the front stairs towards the house under the cover of the EMP Gatling gun. Above them on the rooftops, more sharp shots and stealths lay in wait silently, surrounding the house. Riz turned to see the black shadow tearing down the street, away from the house. It wasn't a bone suit she recognized. This was new. She could see the familiar Skeleton Crew logo etched on its back. Paprika? She said to herself in disbelief. Riz didn't understand, but now she knew for sure something was very wrong with this plan. She broke away from the pack and started after the shadow. Jason came through the radio. Riz! Get back to the others now or... Jason, something is wrong. Riz replied firmly. What I tell you about disobeying orders? Riz had had enough. Sue me, Habibi, she said. She muted Jason and kept running. Shiv and Taki didn't notice Riz peel off as they strafed up the stairs toward the house. Shiv brandished an EMP shotgun. Taki had an EMP sniper rifle slung across his back. A marshal lunged at Taki from behind a chair on the porch. Taki slipped the punch, grabbed its arm, and twisted it behind its back. Shiv stepped forward and spiked a patch into the marshal's comms port. The robot stumbled, then froze. Its blue eyes slowly turned yellow. It worked! Taki exclaimed, punching the air. The Alameda aliens caught up on foot from the blockade. Taki motioned to them, and the aliens took up positions guarding the house. Shiv looked at Jane, still cowering in the corner of the porch, looking confused. I seen her on the news, right? Shiv said to Taki. Taki opened his visor and looked at Jane. Yeah. Works for Proda, or just got fired. I don't remember which, he replied, rifle trained on the house. Yo, you better take a walk, honey, Shiv said to Jane, motioning for her to leave. Wait, said Jane, getting up. It's a trap. Shiv kissed her teeth. Bitch, please. We're the trap, Shiv retorted. Someone watch this lady? I don't trust her. Two aliens marched over to Jane, weapons on her. Jane raised her hands again, sighing. Please, listen to me. She shouted. I know who Warhead is. Shiv and Taki looked at her, then at each other, and laughed. Sure, lady, Shiv said sarcastically. You know many people think they know? Shiv responded, you don't know squat. It was only then Jane realized she had never asked Warhead their real name. She attempted to boot up Luminous, but the Broadsiders were jamming the perimeter from the Jeep. She tried remembering the name used on their Flex work account, but it was too late. Taki and Shiv were moving out of earshot, towards the house with their weapons raised. Shiv booted in the open front door, spraying the entryway. Two marshals that had taken cover inside dived. Taki ran in, stabbing patches into their backs. They lurched and bucked, before relaxing like their strings had been cut. They stopped fighting and stood upright as their eyes turned yellow. Where the code's at, said Shiv looking around. From the safe house Jason watched Taki, Shiv and the other Broadsiders' POV-cams. Downstairs. Jason said to Shiv. Is Riz with you? He watched Shiv and Taki head downstairs on the screens. The hacked marshal stood upright, eyes glowing yellow, completely still. Negative, said Shiv, edging down the stairs, shotgun raised. Jason hit a button on the 92.7 FM radio app. All teams stand by. The words rippled out across the city. Michelle, Art and Koth heard them, as did the other teams of Broadsiders posted close to the pyramid. They skulked in doorways, car parks, stairwells, and coffee shops. They wore armor under hoods, weapons hidden, at the ready. We're almost at the server room, said Jason's voice over the popping of the static. As soon as they're in, we strike. Paprika's boots pounded the pavement. The two stealths marauded after them, firing. A blast hit a jogger running the other way, sending her to the ground. Pedestrians dived, cowering behind cars in disbelief, as a metal skeleton, chased by two ghosts, thundered past. Paprika jumped onto a low wall and over a fence. They plunged through backyards, the new armor making easy work of the fences in their way. Some they vaulted, some they ran straight through. The stealth sliced after them, blasting. Paprika landed in a yard to see a trampoline close to a house. They ran at it, bouncing upwards onto a low roof. They clambered up to the main rooftop and leapt from there to the next. They sped up, making it from rooftop to rooftop with ease. The new armor made them almost superhuman, boosting their jumps and absorbing the impact as solar roof tiles cracked and fractured underfoot. The stealths were now on the rooftops too. One of them was gaining fast. Paprika leapt onto a large flat-roofed house. The robot was right behind them. The electronic whir of its joints got louder. Paprika ran towards the edge of the flat roof. It was too far to jump to the next house. Paprika sped up anyway. The robot sped up too, about to grab them when Paprika stopped dead, curled into a ball. The stealth tried to stop, skidding. But it was too late. Whump! It tripped over Paprika, over the edge and straight into the blades of a maglev wind turbine, spinning on a lower rooftop like a giant horizontal fan. The turbine sliced the stealth apart like a doll in a blender. It brayed and thrashed as it died, green slime spattering the walls around it. Paprika looked back. The second stealth was behind them and gaining fast. Paprika dropped from the flat rooftop into the backyard of the house, and ran on. Shiv and Taki emerged from the lower floor of Jane's house empty-handed. Are you sure? Jason's voice said. There's nothing down here, man. I'm telling you, replied Shiv. Try upstairs. Shiv and Taki made their way up the stairs, turning to look at the two marshals with the glowing yellow eyes as they passed. Paprika tore through the yards and over the rooftops of Noe Valley, heading in the direction of the highest hills and the Sutro Tower, standing tall up on Twin Peaks. Paprika skidded to a stop. The roof of the next house was far below at the bottom of a steep hill. In the sky above, Paprika saw two red and white dogjets circling, coming into a landing close to Jane's house. Paprika looked down. It was a long drop. Behind them, the second stealth was catching up. It started blasting again. Paprika ducked, hearing Carlos' voice in their head. "Are you scared of heights, or are you a broadsider? Because you can't be both." Paprika took a deep breath, clenched their fists, took a running jump and dived headfirst at the roof far below. The stealth dived after them. Paprika sailed over a tree, the wind getting louder, the house below getting closer, curled into a ball and KRAAASSSSHHHH. Paprika smashed through the roof of the house, landing on the second floor in a hallway. Plaster and roof tiles rained down on them as their airbags deflated. Paprika pulled themselves up using the banisters in the hallway as support and looked around, clutching their knee in pain. From the sound of things, no one was home. They headed for the stairs, limping as they went. The stealth leapt out from a bedroom doorway, covered in plaster too. It lashed out, grabbing Paprika across the chest, dragging them into a bedroom. It was a typical spare bedroom, office. A 3D one by the desk, double bed floating 2 feet off the floor, and a huge hole in the ceiling where the stealth had crash-landed. The robot threw Paprika to the floor, locking them into a fierce ground game. Paprika grappled with the shadow, trying to get on top of it, raining blows down into its face, but this was not a marshal. Its armor was as tough as theirs, and with no weapon, Paprika had little chance. The robot straddled Paprika and raised a heavy metal fist. Paprika dodged the blow as the fist slammed down, countering with a body shot, puncturing a small hole between the robot's ribs. The stealth flinched, giving Paprika a split-second opening to push the robot off. Paprika staggered to their feet. The stealth sprung, charging Paprika, slamming them into the desk. The robot towered over Paprika, shimmering in and out of visibility. Its 4 blue eyes pulsed as it started to tighten its grip around Paprika's neck. Paprika struggled for air, panicking. The robot's grip tightened. Blam! A shot of blue lightning ripped through the stealth's body. The robot let go of Paprika as green sludge burst from its torso. Riz stood in the doorway, EMP shotgun smoking. Paprika leapt up, grabbed the stealth into a headlock, opening their visor, gasping air back into their lungs as green liquid drained from the robot's chest cavity. Paprika felt a bolt of rage course through them as they rammed the stealth face first into the chamber at the top of the 3D one and hit the recycle button. The printer whirred into action. The robot made a strange wailing sound as the 3D one grated and melted its head back into filings and filament. Slime and sparks flew. Its arms flailed. Paprika pushed the robot face down with all they had, using the printer like a garbage disposal. The shadow brayed and writhed. Slime splashed Paprika's face until finally, the robot stopped struggling. Paprika dropped the robot's headless carcass and turned to Riz. She looked back at Paprika through her open visor, still catching her breath. She looked nervous. Paprika felt it too. They hadn't been alone since what happened in the bedroom at the safe house. But Paprika had never been happier to see her. Paprika took off their helmet. "You came back for me?" Paprika asked. Riz nodded. Paprika realized they had green liquid on their face. They self-consciously started to wipe it off. Riz stepped forward and lightly brushed the rest from Paprika's cheek. "I should have listened to you," Riz said. "I'm sorry." Her eyes softened. This felt good. That she had faith in Paprika, in the end. "I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have run out on you." Paprika held out their hand. "Friends?" Riz thought on this a beat, like that wasn't exactly what she wanted. But she smiled and took Paprika's hand. They looked at each other as their hands lingered together. Paprika wanted to be more than friends, desperately. But this didn't feel like the time or the place. Inside, Paprika felt something shift. Riz had been there for them. She had believed in Paprika. So had Jane. If they could, maybe the others would too. Maybe Paprika could lead the way Zero had wanted. Maybe they could still win this. Paprika looked past Riz, out of the window, towards Jane's house, suddenly remembering where they were. What the hell is going on out there? Paprika and Riz put their helmets back on as they bounced downstairs. Shiv and the others are at the house where the server is. The plan was to either hack or offline the marshals out front. The patches work, by the way. Here, take some, Riz said, handing Paprika a few as they reached the foot of the stairs. Paprika nodded and stuffed the patches in their pockets, stopping, trying to piece it all together. There's no server at that house, Riz. That's Jane Stratton's house. The woman from Proda, remember? Jane is on our side. Riz looked horrified. Why would they? We got a tip-off over the radio. Some British guy told Jason the codes were there. I knew something was up. Everyone else is downtown waiting to attack the pyramid. Paprika stopped in their tracks, putting it all together. The British guy is Rook, the head of security at Proda. He killed Carlos. Proda used Jane's house to trap us and set her up. If they know about the radio network, they know about everything we're doing. We need to get all the teams out. Now. Paprika opened the radio app as they ran for the front door. Shiv and Taki came back down the stairs at Jane's, looking frustrated. This whole place is empty, man. I swear down, Shiv said. That's impossible, insisted Jason. As they spoke, one of the marshals they had hacked with a patch turned, watching them with yellow eyes. Rook watched too from the hexacopter, the marshal's camera feed streaming onto his screen. Next to it, on another display, he had another feed open. A sharpshot was spying on Jason at the safe house in South City. At the safe house, panic spread across Jason's face. Then that means... Riz's voice came over the radio, cutting him off. Guys, get out now, it's a setup. I repeat, get everyone out. Rook nodded to his people as they listened in from the hexacopter. Now! The sharpshot in South City fired first. A heat blast shattered the window at the safe house. A second hit Jason between the eyes. His head bounced off the radio console, knocking him unconscious as he fell to the floor. At Jane's house, the hacked marshals sprang to life. One of the robots shot Taki point blank in the face, hammering him into the floor. Shiv ran, kicking open the front door to see marshals and stealths destroying the Alameda aliens posted outside. A bolt of fire hit Shiv square in the chest from a sharpshot on the roof opposite. They collapsed in the doorway as heat smashed into them from all sides. Paprika and Riz sprinted back to Jane's as fast as they could. They had the radio app open, but Jason and the others weren't responding. All they could hear was the echoes of gunfire and fighting. Stay off this channel, Paprika barked into the radio app. It's not safe to talk here anymore. Jane's house came into view on the street at the bottom of the hill. Paprika and Riz stopped, looking down at the scene. A platoon of robots had the house surrounded. The stealths shot the last few aliens unceremoniously. Marshals loaded the unconscious Broadsiders into a riot wagon. A dog jet idled in the street. Jane was nowhere to be seen. The radio waves were silent. The Broadsiders' SUVs, and several other parked cars, were smashed and dented. Windows broken. Onlookers were being held back and the block cordoned off with glowing digital "Do Not Cross" lines by yet more marshals. Debris and dead robots were scattered across the street. A British voice crackled over the radio. This is a message for Warhead. This is your only chance to save your mates. If you're not out front of Stratton's house in 5, I promise you, you'll never see any of your little runt friends again. The air went dead. Riz turned off the radio and looked at Paprika, who was deep in thought. I have to go, Paprika finally said. Riz grabbed their arm. Are you crazy? Why would? We can't let them kill anyone else, Riz, Paprika said. We need to get everybody back from the pyramid. It's not safe to attack. All of their security systems are still online. Paprika put their hand on Riz's arm and gave her a squeeze. Trust me, I'm not going it alone this time. I'm buying us some time so you can get everyone out. We're doing this together. You and me, and all of us. I'll find you again. I promise. We'll regroup. Wait for me? They looked at each other through their visors. All right, I believe in you, Paprika. I always did. Paprika looked at her a second longer, eyes smiling through their visor. Paprika gripped her hand one last time before letting go. Go? Riz nodded, snapped her visor down and started to run in the other direction. Paprika turned to the robots standing in the street below. They took a breath and started walking towards them. Hey! Paprika shouted. Over here. The robots circled Paprika like they had a wild animal cornered. Paprika's footwork matched theirs. They crouched in a combat stance, turning their head and eyeing each of them, fists clenched. A torso materialized in front of Paprika, shimmering in the air. They stopped. The robots did too, guns trained on Paprika. Sam Core was looking straight at Paprika from his boardroom, grinning. He didn't look like the glowing, healthy guy Paprika always saw in the media. He looked like a junkie. Was he wearing a bone suit? Paprika glared at him through their closed visor. Mr. Warhead, said Sam with a little bow. It's an honor. Paprika stared back. Look, said Sam, this is pointless. All this fighting. For what? I don't even know who you are, or what you want. What I do know is, you're talented. Paprika blinked back at him. I want to make a deal. Help me make this right. Sam said it like it was the best news in the world. Come quietly. You won't be punished. In fact, I could use you. Your whole team would be a huge value add to Proda. White Hat Hackers. A special innovation team. You'll earn well. Be heroes. We'll put a good spin on this whole fiasco. Sounds okay, right? Better than being a martyr, no? Sam said this with a timid laugh, like this wasn't really a threat. Paprika was frozen, brain ticking. Sam still had no idea who Paprika was. What Paprika wanted, more than anything, was to take Proda down. And here was CEO Sam Core inviting them into the nerve center, the Spiderhead Zero had spent his life trying to crush. Look, here's what I'm thinking, Sam said calmly. The team here will hand you off to Rook. Paprika bristled at the mention of his name. You'll have a security debrief with his team and then let's you and I talk here over some sushi? Or steak? A grain bowl, whatever you want. Doesn't matter, but that's it. There will be no charges brought against you. I swear, you can come in now and have an easy life. Paprika stared back at him with dead eyes, giving away nothing. Or, you can keep running, Sam added, and inevitably, at some point. He sighed, wringing his hands like there was nothing he could do. Okay, Paprika said in a deep voice. I'll come in. Sam cracked a thin smile and nodded. I'll see you shortly. Two marshals walked Jane into the Proda boardroom, throwing her into a chair. Sam's looked over at her from the windows where he was standing, finishing a video call. Jane looked up at Sam, hands zip-tied behind her back. She hardly recognized him. He was wearing an armor suit like Rook's. He smiled at her, but he looked groggy. He was swaying slightly. Skin pale, sweat was beading on his brow. Was he drunk? Behind Sam was a man's silhouette on a screen. Jane had seen this man before, but never spoken to him directly. His name was Nov Devet, chairman of Proda's board and founder of Advanced Basics, their parent company. Short, silvery hair glowed around the dark outline of his head. The screen he was on disappeared. Sam turned and grinned at her. You know, when we saw you hacking the intranet, we thought, let's send all the terrorists to Jane's house, round everyone up all at once. Put a nice bow on the story. Turns out, you really were helping them. Sam laughed unconvincingly, clearly upset, opening the footage of Paprika running out from Jane's house. Jane didn't dispute this. Sam looked disappointed, but calm. I am hurt, Jane. Really, I thought we were friends. We did so much good work together. This is a real bummer. But it's done. Jane looked up at him. Sam, trust me. I know you think you have this, but if you don't listen to me now, you're done. I promise you that. These kids, this community, what they are doing, the way they are doing it. I don't think you or anyone else is ever going to stop them. Sam laughed at the thought, sitting down on the floor next to her, crossing his legs and flipping his hair back. You can start by telling me all about this warhead character. Riz crouched under a tree, a safe distance away, still able to see everything. She watched as 4 marshals escorted Paprika into the dog jet. She opened the radio app once more. If you can hear me, this network has been compromised. Get off this channel. To all the teams downtown. The words came over the radio on the building site where Koth, Michelle and Art were stationed, close to the top of the tower. Koth had a sharp shot on the pyramid opposite in his sights. You need to get out of there now. As fast as you can. I repeat. Get out now. Retreat and we will regroup. It's over. The 3 warriors looked at each other as the radio went dead. Wind whistled through the bones of the building. The huge crane next to them creaked, swaying in the breeze. Art looked at the ground far below. He could see lights flashing. A riot wagon had driven onto the site. Its red and white passengers were climbing out, scanning the area. A block over in the Proto boardroom, Sam had the radio on now too. Jane was still sat in the chair opposite, the 2 marshals guarding the doors. Ah yes. The team's downtown, Sam muttered. He swiveled in his chair. He looked out at the city. Making calculations. Despite everything he had accomplished today, it wasn't finished. He opened a video screen. An engineer in Proto overalls looked up at Sam as the camera feed opened. I want you to shut off the power. Announce a citywide blackout until all those conspiring against us are brought to heel, he said. This ends tonight. The engineer thought on this a beat, and nodded. Jane stood up. The marshals behind her stood ready. Her arms were still zip-tied behind her. The power? Sam, you can't. She caught her breath, composing herself. She was done begging Sam, but she had to say something. Sam, Jane said calmly. You must listen to me. Innocent people will die if you cut the power. There must be another. I don't want this, Jane. Sam said indignantly, but I have to protect this city, Fro. No. Jane was done. She saw red, and lunged forward at him, getting in his face. Before she could take another step, a marshal whipped forward from its post and grabbed her, holding her back. You're sick. The choices you're making are killing people. Jane roared. The only thing the city needs protection from is you, Sam. What gives you the right to play God? Sam looked genuinely shocked by the outburst. He paused, considering her question for a second before answering. I'm not playing. Night was falling, but it was impossible to tell in the windowless bowels of Proto HQ. A marshal faced an imposing control screen. Its display read, Energy Grid Power Level. The robot slid a fader to the 0 position. Streetlights, buildings, and billboards started to snuff out around the pyramid. The darkness radiated out from there across San Francisco, all the way out to the giant anthills of South City. Paprika sat cuffed in the back of the dog jet as it ascended into the sky. They'd been stuffed in there, no search, no Miranda rights, nothing, still in their armor and helmet. A marshal sat next to Paprika and 2 more opposite. Paprika looked out at the city, blacking out block after block, as the craft bumped through turbulence. Paprika's hands were in their lap. They felt something in their pocket, something flat and solid. The patches. Paprika looked at the marshals opposite through their visor. They moved their hand. Slowly. Their fingers crept into their pocket, eyes locked on the marshals. Paprika made out like they were scratching their leg, slipping a patch out of their pocket and into in their palm. They gripped it. Were they really about to do this? They waited. No. Paprika's heart was thumping. It's the only play left. They waited. But it's suicide if... Paprika wrestled with the idea. They had to. No. They took a breath. Bam! Paprika's cuffed arms whipped round into the face of the robot next to them. Paprika caved the patch into its face. The robot's head hit the back wall with a clang. The black patch jammed into its eye socket. The robot began shaking. Having a seizure. Paprika jumped up, throwing themselves into the two marshals opposite as they stood to restrain them. Paprika punched a second patch into the second marshal's eye. The third marshal grabbed Paprika, slamming them into the metal floor of the dogjet. The robot's heat gun charged. Paprika flinched, ready for the burn as the patched marshals grabbed the unpatched one in a headlock and prized it away from Paprika. Paprika lay on the ground controlling the patched marshals via Luminous, connected to the patches via Wi-Fi. Paprika was moving the marshals with their mind, forcing the two pirate robots to overpower the third. Paprika jumped up, spun, and stabbed a patch into the last marshal's eye socket. In the front of the dogjet, the marshal piloting the craft heard the commotion. It opened a small hatch into the back. "Everything okay back there?" it asked, without turning. There was no reply. The pilot turned to look through the hatch. A robot arm burst out, slapping a patch into its face. Rook watched as the dogjet approached the hexacopter. He stood tall in his armor, visor up, waiting to meet the kid who'd given him so much trouble these last few days. He was looking forward to this. Sam had told him to get it over with quickly. But Rook was going to do it slowly. A legion of stealths stood in formation in front of him. The dogjet got closer. It wasn't slowing down. Rook frowned. It was too close. Too fast. His eyes widened. He dived for cover. CRAAASSSSHHHHH. The dogjet butted through the glass, demolishing the line of stealths. It wrapped itself around a pillar housing one of the hexacopter's 8 massive rotor blades. Rook sat up, dazed. Surrounded by debris, fire, and dead shadows. The dogjet's doors swished open. 4 marshals wearing eye patches climbed out, moving in a tight formation, firing at the surviving stealths. Behind them, he saw the silhouette of Warhead. The familiar skull looked at him, horns jutting toward the sky, fangs glinting, wearing new armor. Warhead shimmered in and out of visibility. Was that his armor? Warhead walked towards him. The pirates and stealths tore into each other. Behind them one of the hexacopter's rotors wobbled in its housing, loosened by the impact of the dogjet. Rook stood to face his nemesis. This boy who'd glassed him, burned him, humiliated him, thrown an EMP grenade in his face. He lowered his visor and moved forward from his corner, adrenaline pumping, ready to fight. "Come on then, boy. Let's avenue it. Let's avenue it," he screamed. Rook wind milled in like a soccer hooligan, arms whirling. Paprika charged, aiming true. They landed the first punch. Rook ate it like a snack. He clumped them back harder. Paprika winced. Rook grabbed Paprika, pulling them into a headlock, overpowering them. Paprika wrestled an arm free and jabbed out a spiked elbow, catching Rook's throat. He stumbled back, spluttering, winded, coughing up blood. Paprika seized the moment and lunged, banging a combination into Rook's face. He took a few before sidestepping and parrying. They grappled, but even in the new armor, Paprika's strength was no match for Rook. He picked Paprika up and slammed them into the deck with awesome force. The pain was transcendental. Paprika felt like they were leaving their body as the wind escaped their lungs. Rook pushed Paprika's wheezing body into the floor with one hand, pounding their head with his other fist. Each blow slammed into Paprika's helmet with a crunch, rocking them. Paprika tried to block. It was no use. Rook kept pounding. His fists were like Rottweilers. Paprika's body went limp. It was hard to tell the blows apart. It was one feeling now. Rook lifted them and pinned them to a wall. In the background the rotor column rattled and hummed louder. Getting looser. Paprika breathed air into their lungs, trying to recover. Rook leaned in and opened his visor. "I told you I'd be the one to do ya, didn't I?" "I promised." Paprika opened their visor too. They suddenly felt life energy surge back through them. Rook's jaw dropped. Paprika knew he wasn't expecting this. For Warhead to reveal their identity, to show Rook who they really were. Paprika knew it would be a surprise. Just for a second, just long enough for KRONCH. Paprika head butted Rook. The corner of their helmet caught the bridge of his nose. He reeled back as it broke, dropping Paprika, his whole face stinging. He howled. And then, he laughed. He touched his nose, looking down at his bloodied glove, and then back at Paprika, blood smeared across his face. He snapped his visor back down. Paprika did the same. He ran at them, roaring. Paprika reached out to their left and grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. Rook flew into Paprika as they brought it around, bashing it upside his head. It stunned him, and he stumbled. Paprika lunged forward and hit him with the fire extinguisher again. And again. And again. Rook staggered back. And again. His visor cracked. Screech. The rotor column behind them came completely loose. It ground and tore at its housing. Sparks started to fly. Rook turned at the sound. Paprika took a step backwards. The housing exploded. The rotor stem snapped clean in two. Outside, the broken rotor creaked, collapsing inwards towards the ship. The rotor's massive blades were still spinning at top speed. Paprika and Rook watched as the blades cut through the roof. Rook was stood in their path. No time to move. The reinforced steel roof of the hexacopter crumpled like paper as the blades chopped into it. The blades caught Rook's armor, flinging him out into space. They slashed completely through the hull of the ship, cutting the hexacopter in two. Paprika looked up at Rook as he screamed, hurled upwards into the night, a death crack stretching head to crotch across his bone suit. The hexacopter tipped like a boat in a storm. Paprika slipped and rolled out of the broken hull, falling towards Earth. Above them, the hexacopter's battery cells caught a spark, and the ship erupted. Comets of metal rained down. Paprika plummeted towards Earth, spinning as the debris shower chased them towards the ground. A warning message flashed in their head-up display. Warning! Airbags only effective at 1,000 feet max. Current altitude: 5,763 feet. Paprika tumbled through the air, terrified. They couldn't even scream. Then they heard their brother's voice again. Paprika was a broadsider. The fear turned to courage. Paprika breathed deeper, stretched out their arms, and the tumble turned to a wobble. They remembered what they were wearing. Paprika righted themselves into an uneasy skydive. Petrified, but in control, and whoosh! Paprika stretched out their hands as the short wings deployed from their stealth armor, and suddenly, they were flying. The wind whistling up from the city below was deafening. Paprika looked down. Lights continued to flicker out, block by block. Proda had cut the city's power. Paprika was crushed. Zero was wrong. Proda still controlled the city grid, which meant it was over. It also occurred to Paprika, as they flew towards the Hayes Valley skyscraper farm, that they didn't really know how to fly in a bone suit. The skyscraper farm got closer. Paprika tried to slow up and glide towards it, but it was getting larger, fast. Way too fast. Paprika braced themselves, curled in a ball, and scratch! Paprika corkscrewed through the glass into a field of crops on the top floor. Their airbags opened as their bodies smashed through the soil and crops, heading straight for an unmanned combine harvester. There was no stopping. Outside, the city was almost pitch black. The farm's lights snuffed out. The harvester's power died with them, and its blades slowed. Paprika plowed to a stop between the harvester's teeth. The blades jammed into Paprika's helmet, biting the glass. The last thing Paprika saw was their visor shattering as the blades bit into their face. Episode 11. Warhead. Monday, July 20th, 2037. The city was dark. The only light came from the remains of the hexacopter smoldering on the ridges of Twin Peaks, and the pyramid downtown, the only building with power. The dim rays of first light began to creep across the sky. And with them, slowly, the lights of San Francisco began to blink back on. One by one at first. Then geometrically, exponentially. At the top of the farm tower, Paprika was still out cold. The harvester blades had cut into their face, but not through it, their shattered visor saving them. A neon glow from the opposite building came on, lighting their bloodied cheek. An eye opened. Paprika prized themselves from the harvester's mouth and rose. Coughing, shaking, wiping the blood from their face. Their skull helmet was dented, their visor obliterated. One of their horns had snapped off completely. They were in pain, cut and bruised, but nothing was broken. Paprika limped over to the windows and looked out at the city. Their jaw dropped as they saw the spreading sea of lights. It wasn't uniform. Some blocks shone brighter than others. There were dark patches. None of the street lights were on. But the houses, the buildings not under Proto control, enough of those were networked that the city was free. Paprika smiled, and then laughed. Taking the view in, seeing something amazing for the first time. San Francisco, lit by its own decentralized power network, no longer under Proto control. Riz was still hiding out in Noe Valley. She'd fallen asleep in cover behind a filament recycling dumpster close to Jane's house, caked in sweat and dirt from the battle. She didn't know where was safe or what was happening after seeing the explosion on the ridge, so she'd stayed there. A phone icon flashed. Her eyes opened. She answered. Paprika. What the? Their power and comms are out. We can win. We can finish this. Paprika, we lost, Riz said blearily. The city is blacked out. They took out Jason, our comms center is. That's what I'm saying. Our network doesn't have a center. That's why we can win. Their surveillance ship is down. So, we can talk on any channel we like. Their power grid is down. Our solar network is still up. Zero was right. Look at the lights. Don't you see? See what? Asked Riz, standing up and looking out at the city lights coming on building by building. What do you see? Paprika watched as the lights continued to spread. A starfish. Sam was watching in disbelief. Jane too. More lights went on. He was trembling, not wanting to believe it. He turned to an engineer on a screen. I said shut the power down. Why isn't it down? Where's Rook? The entire protogrid is down, said the engineer. The power is coming from other sources. I'm afraid we still haven't located Mr. Rook, sir. Sam looked down at the city. People were starting to gather in the streets below. He could hear cheers and shouting. 3D bass started pumping, shaking the surrounding towers of glass. He could see little pirate emojis floating in the sky above the people like lanterns. Sam started pacing the room. Shaking, he bumped into a chair. He lost it and turned, yanking the chair out of its magnetic field, and hurled it at the windows. The glass spidered as the chair crashed to the floor. He looked back out at the streets through the cracks. At the crowd below, at his wrecked hexacopter slumped on the hill. And the bright lights blinking back at him. Paprika stared back at the pyramid from the farm tower. They opened a screen and patched into the radio network. They took a breath. Hello, my name is Warhead. I'm a part of the group known as Skeleton Crew. We're responsible for hacking Broadside. For the attacks on Proto. For much of what's happened over the last 10 days. Riz sped towards the farm in the wrecked open-top SUV they had used to attack Jane's house. She was listening to Paprika's speech on the radio, as many people were, as many future generations would. If you suffered because of what we did, we are truly sorry. But it was not be for nothing. Riz lurched to a stop by the skyscraper farm as Paprika blew out of the entrance. All around them, people were pouring into the streets. My friend Zero MC once told me we shouldn't just judge a society by what it builds. We should also judge it by what it chooses to destroy. Riz held out a hand, helping Paprika into the passenger seat. She pulled Paprika in, hugging them tight. Paprika looked back at her through their open, cracked visor, leant forward and kissed Riz. Today we can change something. Something we should have changed a long time ago. They raced towards the pyramid in the dented SUV. If you want Proto's control to end, pick up whatever you have. Hordes of people swarmed through the streets towards the pyramid. Many wore skull helmets and broadside gear. The police walked with them, many of them also in skulls and pieces of armor too. The words Skeleton Crew stenciled across their backs. 3D bass seemed to be playing from everywhere. Pirate emojis filled the air. Koth, Michelle and Art were awake after a long night stranded at the top of the construction site by the crane, guarded by marshals below, listening in to Warhead's speech. In front of the pyramid, a line of riot wagons blocked the entrance to the building. A garrison of marshals stood 10 deep in front of the wall of vehicles. Impenetrable, sharp shots peered out into the crowds from windows of the pyramid. Head to the pyramid downtown. We won't get this chance again. Paprika and Riz stood in the parked SUV at the top of a hill, looking down at the pyramid at the end of the street. So how you wanna run this? Riz asked. Paprika looked at the pyramid. How many of them are there? They asked. We've clocked 15,300 marshals, stealths, sharp shots or whatever other crazy robots they got. Paprika noodled this. How many of us are there? Exactly 7,234, Riz replied. Paprika nodded. Tell the other teams to hit from the sides, Paprika said. We'll take the front door. Paprika looked down Market Street and noticed the half-finished skyscraper across the street from Proto HQ. A crane with a huge 3D printer nozzle hung from its summit. Is anyone close to that crane? Paprika asked. Riz opened a 3D map, covered in dots, indicating where the 7,234 Broadsiders were stationed, and smiled. We have a team right there. Been posted up since last night. Guess it was too hot for them to get out. Paprika pulled up a screen, rifling through CAD files of preset shapes, stopping on a triangle. Let's get that crane online, Paprika said. Riz looked at the triangle design, then at the crane, and the garrison of robots below the pyramid. She grinned. But today, Michelle climbed into the crane's cab, pulling open the same triangular design file Paprika had opened. Today we can win this. Koth had his sniper rifle pointed at the sharp shots opposite on the pyramid. Art had his blaster trained on the floors below. Today, Paprika stared down the pyramid and the army out front. None of them are as strong as all of us. The approaching horde of Broadsiders marched on the pyramid. The thick line of marshals and riot wagons out front was a wall of red and white metal, studded with glowing blue eyes. Bones up! Paprika shouted into the radio, lifting their crossed arms into the air from the front of the open-top SUV. A roar went up. The mob advanced. Swarms of skull and crossbones emojis rose high into the air. The mob took aim and started firing EMP pulses. The robots clapped back with heat blasts. From the ratio of EMP pulses to ADS heat blasts slicing through the air, it was clear that the Broadsiders were outnumbered and outgunned. Broadsiders started to fall. Now! Paprika cried from the SUV on the hill. Above the melee, the crane's snout shuddered to life and creaked as it turned, pointing towards the line of marshals and riot wagons below. A deep whooshing sound emerged from the crane, followed by a torrent of red-hot liquid glass. It rained down mercilessly on the robots and vehicles. Cooling almost instantly, the marshals thrashed and bucked as the glass solidified around them. Heat blasts and bullets continued to fly. Sharp shots sniped from the pyramid. Broadside snipers hit back from the surrounding buildings. Wax of molten glass spooged down from the crane's nose in sheets, cementing the robots in place. The robots towards the front choked as the hot liquid filled their systems, clambering over each other, trying to escape. Paprika and Riz watched as the marshals out front stopped kicking, drowning in their sticky tomb, suspended in molten the glass like insects in amber. Broadsiders fired at any limbs still moving. The glass was taking on a triangular shape, like a wedge of cake, or more precisely, a ramp. The robots gave up, one by one, as a final glob of molten glass burped from the crane's nose. It wasn't enough. Maybe a few hundred had been taken out at best. More robots started swarming the air from the sides of the building. Less than Paprika's greater than heart sank. There were too many. Then came a scream. Bones up, bones up! A distorted voice roared, behind a deafening wall of 3D bass. Bass lines rippled into the air from the side streets and alleys on all sides of the pyramid, shaking the windows, distorting the air, and disturbing the robots. The sea of backlit blue eyes began to flicker. Paprika's eyes widened as a squadron of rave tanks, the source of the sound, rolled into view on all sides, surrounding the pyramid. They were 3D printed and misshapen, with huge LRAD sound systems towering from their hulls, painted in dazzling rave camo patterns. Their EMP gun turrets began pummeling the robots with thick bolts of lightning, offline several with each shot. At the back of one of the tanks, Mr. Dallas and the faceless DJ in VR goggles and ski mask pumped 3D bass from the speaker stacks, jamming the robots' operating systems. Mr. Dallas bellowed, repeating less than Paprika's greater than words. None of them are as strong as all of us. Bass rippled. Blasts hit. Robots dropped. The crowd roared. No center. Paprika punched the air, turning to Riz. Damn right, said Riz with a smile. Riz looked at the misshapen glass ramp cooling in front of the pyramid. Then at Paprika. Let's do this, she said. Paprika nodded, taking a breath and bellowing into the radio, bones up, bones up. The streets roared. The Broadsiders in front of them cleared a path. Riz threw the SUV into drive and floored it. They sped downhill. The rave tanks and Broadsiders on the street lay down cover fire, keeping the path ahead clear as more marshals piled around from the sides of the pyramid. The SUV hurtled towards the building, flying straight up the molten glass ramp. It sailed over the riot wagons and the anti-vehicle barriers, landing in front of the building and crashing through the glass, into the lobby of Proto HQ. A deafening battle cry went up. Paprika and Riz braced themselves. The SUV smashed into another line of marshals inside. They fired their EMP blasters from the vehicle as their airbags deflated, and robots surrounded the vehicle. The mob of Broadsiders charged in behind them through the broken walls of glass, plunging into the robots. Blasts and EMP grenades whizzed by. Green goop spattered the floors. From the top of the building, Jane watched the battle below with a smile. It was a strange moment. She'd spent years helping build this company up. Now her heart was with the rebels tearing it down. She turned to look at Sam. Her hands were still tied, and the marshal's cold blue eyes tracking her every movement. Sam had his back to her, lost in a grid of security feeds that hung above the boardroom table like a glowing patchwork quilt. He frantically moved legions of marshals on a map, shoring them up around the pyramid's lobby. But marshals were going offline as fast as he could move them in, as they were either hacked or bricked. He stepped back from the screens. Shaking, he turned to a marshal. Ready my aircraft. We're leaving. Jane turned to look at him. They don't need you anymore, Sam. He turned and looked at her with no pride left. His only instinct now was survival. He walked over to the bar in the corner of the room. Well, Jane, he said with a smile, picking up a small ice pick from the bar. Unfortunately, I still need you. Riz and Paprika stood in the wrecked SUV, now the centerpiece of the Proto lobby. It was surrounded by the mob of Broadsiders and the patched robots they had hacked, fighting back against the ever-dwindling number of Proto-controlled robots. Dead robots in pools of green caked the marble floor. The battle was all but won. The cells below Proto HQ had been holding several Broadsiders and those suspected of helping them since the hack. With the security systems down, the cells had been opened by the mob, and crowds of released captives were pouring into the lobby from the tombs below. Paprika saw Taki and Shiv emerge from the crowd. They made their way over to Riz and Paprika. Paprika looked at them through their broken visor. Their eyes were soft. They felt a new sense of confidence. Paprika climbed down from the back of the SUV. I'm sorry. We should have listened to you back at the safe house, Taki said. I shouldn't have left you guys, Paprika replied. We're a team. Taki walked forward and hugged Paprika. Shiv put their arms around them both and pulled them into a bear hug. Riz smiled as she passed them weapons from the back of the SUV. Paprika looked up at the news screens floating on the lobby wall. The news was broadcasting a live feed from a drone close to the apex of the pyramid, searchlight trained on Sam's boardroom. Sam was holding Jane by the throat. His eyes roiling, shouting like a madman at the news drone filming him, his stealths firing at it. He looked feral. The footage cut out as a stealth finally took out the drone. The headline read, Core under siege, former exec held hostage. Paprika looked up at the elevator shafts snaking towards the pyramid's summit. Suddenly they were steely-eyed again. Resolute. Let's move, Paprika said. I promised Zero we'd finish this. They headed to the elevators and the others followed. Sam waited impatiently for his dogjet to arrive, pressing the ice pick close to Jane's windpipe. The sound of the battle rumbled on far below. He peered out of the boardroom at the elevators. A squad of stealths surrounded the doors, weapons ready. Someone was coming up. He tightened his grip on Jane, his eyes fixed on the elevator. Ping! The doors opened. A pirate marshal stood inside with one eye patched. Alone, hands behind its back, the stealths looked at it. Confused, the pirate showed its hands. A full house, an EMP grenade in each one. It flung them and, croom! Blue hellfire ripped through the stealths. Paprika, Riz, Taki and Shiv exploded from the fire exit door, guns blazing, filleting the stealths with EMP blasts. The stealths shook as the pulses bricked their systems. The Broadsiders ran in with fists, boots, gun butts, headbutts. Sam watched, stunned. He was seeing their iron resolve, firsthand, for the first time. And he was terrified. He pulled Jane closer. She screamed as he dragged her back towards the helipad on the other side of the vast boardroom. To his left he saw pirate emojis dancing in the air outside, through the spidered glass panel he had thrown the chair at. To his right the glowing quilt of screens, showing Broadsiders filling the lobby and lower floors, hovered above the long black table. With the stealths slain, the skull-headed warriors turned towards the boardroom. Paprika led them, Riz to their right, Taki on the left, Shiv and the pirate marshal towering behind them. All guns on Sam. Turn on your holographic armor, from Broadside, Paprika whispered. What? Why? Taki winced. Trust me, Paprika replied softly. They all did it. A digital layer of cartoonish Broadside hard light armor enveloped the warriors. They advanced. Sam stared at the cartoon warriors, confused and frightened. Stay back, he stammered. They edged closer, and suddenly, the thunder of rotor blades filled the sky. A stealth dogjet uncloaked, touching down on the helipad. Sam turned to see 4 more stealths jump from the craft. They ran in, posting up at the open doors into the boardroom, guns trained on the Broadsiders. He looked back at Paprika and the crew, the panic gone from his face. Back up or I slit her throat, he said calmly. The Broadsiders looked at each other and slowly started backing away. Except for Paprika. Paprika stood stone still, in a combat stance, gun on Sam, glaring. Sam studied Paprika. Something was wrong. Shiv smiled through the hard light armor, shaking their head, catching Sam's eye. Oldest trick in the book? Asshat. Sam frowned, confused. He looked again at Paprika and the NFT holotag of Paprika flickered, almost like it winked. Sam turned to see the real Paprika uncloak as they burst from the other side of the screens above the table. He dropped Jane. Paprika leapt. Sam lunged at Paprika with the ice pick just as Paprika hit him, broadsiding him with a huge right hand. His head snapped back as Paprika's fist connected. He stumbled backwards, tripping over Jane and smashing through the cracked window. He grabbed the window ledge in the nick of time. Paprika dived and scrambled forward, reaching to save Sam. Behind Paprika, the Broadsiders started firing. Riz hurled an EMP grenade and the stealths at the helipad doors clattered to the ground. Sam pulled himself up. He had almost had Paprika's hand when SKKKRAKKKKKKKK. No! Paprika screamed. A huge fissure tore through his standard-issue proto-gauntlet, with the same design fault as Paprika's old broadside glove. It broke open. His hand slid out. Paprika watched in horror as Sam fell, spinning through the dawnlight, with no glass, no screen, or no helmet to obstruct his view of the city. He looked down at San Francisco as he fell, like he was seeing it all for the first time, lost in a thought he would never get to share. Paprika felt their heart breaking again. All they had wanted was revenge. But they never really meant to kill anyone. Sam hit the ground face first. The Broadsiders walked out onto the helipad together, holding Paprika and each other, in shock, trying to process what just happened. A squadron of military hexacopters appeared on the horizon, swishing towards the pyramid. Paprika looked out at them through their broken helmet. Although the police had been marching with them, Paprika didn't feel like this was the time to find out if the army was also sympathetic to their cause. Let's go. Shiv, Taki and Riz headed to the stealth dogjet. The pirate marshal climbed into the cockpit. Jane hurried out after them. Wait, she said, we can fix this. Together. I'll tell everyone what happened. It'll be. No, Paprika turned and shook their head. No one can know who Warhead is. That way, Warhead never dies. Jane studied Paprika's face through their visor. I know you didn't mean to kill him. I'll tell them. Why you did this. What really happened. You'll be a hero. You just took down one of the most corrupt organizations in the country? This will change everything. Behind Jane, Paprika noticed a man's silhouette watching them from one of the screens in the boardroom. His face was hidden in shadows, but his short, silvery hair glowed around the dark outline of his head. He switched off the feed and disappeared. And we'll be here to take down the others like it, Paprika replied, looking back at Jane. And there are others like it. But we need to stay anonymous. No heroes. No center. Just results. With Sam gone, they'll sign a CRA. Everything can work differently now, Jane protested. Only if we're outside of it all. Watching, said Paprika. Jane nodded. Paprika studied her. Our job is to destroy broken systems, Paprika told her. Paprika walked to the dogjet. They stopped and looked back. It's your job to create better ones. Jane smiled at Paprika, nodding again with a look of deep respect. Paprika smiled back. Their head up, carrying themselves differently. A confident warrior. A new kind of leader. Bones up, Paprika said, crossing their arms in front of their chest. Bones up, Jane smiled back, doing the same. Paprika turned and climbed aboard with the others as the doors closed. The engine roared and the aircraft took off. The military were getting close. Jane watched the stealth dogjet float away in the opposite direction, back towards South City. It cloaked as it melted into the sunrise.